for the introduction. I also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you joining in Brussels and online for what promises to be an exciting panel discussion. So please join me in welcoming our panelists today. We have Mr. Thomas Schlecker from the Commission, Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Thomas is responsible for, of course, hydropower, but also in the field of bioenergy, renewable fuels, energy storage, and system integration. Thank you very much for being here and welcome. Then we have Elena Magnoni. Elena, she's Head of Research and Development Group at the Technology Platform for Hydraulic Machines at EPFL, École Politique Fédérale de Lausanne. And she's also Vice Coordinator of our ERA joint program on hydropower. Thank you, Ellen, and welcome. Then we have in present also Edward. You all know him as the chair of Penn Hydropower, but he's also teaching at Technical University of Wien and sub-program coordinator of the ERA joint program on hydropower and also part of the governing board of the EDIP. And last but not least, we have online Dirk Hendricks, Secretary General at the European Renewable Energies Federation, and representing today also EDIP Hydropower. Thank you, Dirk, for being here today. I hope you can hear us loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Perfect. We also have online Adrian Lindemuth, is Policy Advisor for Hydropower, Renewable Energy, Climate and Environment at Euroelectric. Welcome, Adrian.
Good morning also from my side.
And that closes the online panelist, I guess, for this first session, which is named Ambassador for European Hydropower. And the aim of this first session is to explore the current and future landscape of hydropower sector. And I'd really be curious to hear your views and perspective since you come from the different corners also of the hydropower sector, and as the energy landscape continues to evolve, to grow, considering also the high share of other renewable sources included in the energy system like PV, solar power, and wind, maybe the role of hydropower is even more vital at this stage, not only to energy generation, but also to contribute to climate goal, and especially for the resilience of the energy system. So the first question would be to just, if you can depict the picture. So what's the overview now, the current state of play? Are we on track? What are you doing for hydropower at the moment? What is you and your organization doing at the moment in the hydropower sector? Who would like to start and break the ice?
I can start. So thank you very much for the question. And in your question, you already picked on, let's say, the most important elements in the transition in which we are currently. So is the Green Deal, the European Union has, of course, the goal to be climate neutral by 2050. And in this respect, in the last years, important packages in the energy sector were, let's say, moved ahead. I mean, if we think for all the measures in the Fit for 55 package, I think for hydropower in particular relevant are, of course, the update of the Renewable Energy Directive, as well the reform of the electricity market design, making an update of the electricity market in respect of these novel needs, where we have indeed a need for flexibility and the perspective of an increasing share of variable renewables. And here hydropower has, of course, a very important role as a baseload renewable, and also basically as now with a share in renewable electricity comparable to wind, but wind will is expected to increase, of course, in the next year. But hydropower has, of course, this particular asset of being independent of, let's say, wind flows or changes in sunlight. So we have here a particular asset. Now, what is currently, let's say, the last developments, I'm talking here not specifically about hydropower, but we have, of course, the Green Deal Industrial Plan with the Net Zero Industry Act and the Critical Raw Materials Act. And here also hydropower is one of the important technologies covered. So it's important that Europe maintains its competitiveness in this sector. And if we look now in the perspective of what will come in the next commission and the political guidelines from President von der Leyen, it is clear that competitiveness of energy technologies is a key component, and already we can go to this more in detail later, but of course also skills in this area is an eminent question to be addressed.
I can add complementary information on, let's say, what are the challenges then for hydropower in this context. So definitely hydropower is a key source for all those for Europe and all those countries where there is a high capacity which is installed. It provides peak loads, energy adequacy. So through the seasons and years, hydropower is the source of renewable energy source on which many countries can count on. And at the same time, it also provides short-term flexibility. So definitely provides all those services to the power system to have a secure energy supply. That said, if we want to increase solar and wind sources, definitely for those countries where hydropower has a important capacity, we have to count on it as it has all features being renewable and controllable to provide support and regulation to the power system of the present, but also the future. We know that this doesn't come for free. So we know from a research side, so from the experience I got from both the European Energy Research Alliance, but also at EPFL where I work, that we have increasing challenges over the equipment of hydropower stations. Those come, for instance, for accelerated aging of a component, more stricted regulatory framework, for instance, for comply with sustainability standards. So it's very much important that also from a research perspective, we do provide our contributions and we perform all research activities that would enrich hydropower operation from all different components. And these encompass several fields, not only mechanical engineering, which is where I'm from and where I put the focus of my research, but also civil engineering, environmental, and also all electrical, of course, and all fields related to the acceptance or societal acceptance of hydropower operation. It's particularly important. Just to conclude, so definitely all those are challenges that are there from technical aspects, but it's also important to have adequate policy framework in order to support hydropower operations. So definitely plant owners must be motivated and encouraged also from regulatory aspect to provide refurbishment and to improve the operation in this context. So that is also aligned with Thomas just mentioned, that is important to offer to hydropower a solid policy background in order to improve its operation through the energy transition.
Thank you. You summarized quite well. The question is what to add. And the point, I think the point to add is, or summarize is what you said is sustainability. Sustainability covers all fields, from technical point of view down to the social, environmental, and still having all those things in mind, what you explained. Always searching for youngers that will fulfill these questions and they will work in the future. You are young, you will guide those students, but I see quite a lot of colleagues in my age, where in 10 years we will have probably quite a lack of experienced teachers and of course also students. And what I mentioned in one of the slides before is research or how to attract youngers. And it's by research projects, it's by interest, yeah, to create interesting things. Youngers are not afraid of the challenges, but they are afraid probably of not having employment or things like that. And we should also take into consideration this point. But I think there will be later on the discussion also.
Exactly. We will focus on that in the second panel sessions. I'm looking now at participants online. I haven't finished with the round of introduction, actually, because online we also have Gordon Edge. He's head of policy and research at the International Hydropower Association. Thank you very much, Gordon, for being with us today. Who would like to start? So answering to the first question, who was state of play. What you and your organization, what are the initiatives you are currently involved in?
I'm happy to pick it up first, if that's okay. So, globally, because the International Hydropower Association is the peak global association for the hydropower business worldwide, we're looking at this from the biggest picture. Last year at COP28, countries signed up to triple up their renewable capacity by 2030. And whilst the heavy lifting there is going to be solar and wind, there is still an increase required from hydropower of about 200 gigawatts by the time we get to 2030. So there's plenty of increase that needs to be done there. However, beyond that, to get to net zero by about the middle of the century, we're going to need to double the deployment rate of hydro beyond that to about 50 gigawatts a year, which is a considerable increase on where we have been globally. Now that, for me, gives you the point that we're going to have quite a big stress on the supply chain. Not as much as perhaps the guys in wind and solar who are growing at much faster rates, but given that hydropower has been quite a stable industry for a long time, I think that's going to be quite a challenge for an industry that's not in a growth mindset. And that's one that I'm particularly excited about. Having come my history as I was in the wind industry, it's quite a different mindset involved, which is very much aimed at growth. Now, the flip side of that, with all of that wind and solar, is the need for the flexibility it's been alluded to before. And that says to me there is another challenge, which is bringing in the right skills to deliver that flexibility. We have technologies, and many of you may be familiar with the X-Flex Hydro project, which we were involved with. And Elena knows an awful lot about that, which has been great to have EPFL involved in that consortium. So we have the technologies. What we perhaps don't have is the engineers to implement them, and particularly with the digital skills involved to implement the level of control that we need to be that flexible partner to wind and solar. So for me, the challenges are overall growth in the industry globally, which is going to put a stress on anything you might want to do in Europe, even if it's not a lot of greenfield. There certainly will be a lot of modernization work, and that's still using the same supply chain. And also then having the right skills and the right number of people with those skills in order to deliver on that. So that's my two pence worth, as we say here in Britain.
If I may, I'd like to follow up on what Gordon just said. My name Adrian, Euroelectric. If you allow me to provide you with some insights, what Euroelectric is, what we're doing, because not all of you might know us. So Euroelectric is the European Power Sector Association. Compared to the IHA, we do not only represent hydropower. Our expertise spans over the entire power value chain, from generation to distribution to electrification, while also addressing markets and customer issues. We have a rather big office in Brussels, so I have around 45 colleagues, And together with them, we advocate for a clean and secure energy transition. And in our daily work, we engage with the EU institutions, so with the people in the Commission, in the Parliament, and the Council. And yes, so in my role, it was mentioned earlier, I'm the hydropower advisor, so I'm really the one focusing on this technology. And over the past 3 years, we have put dedicated efforts into communicating about this technology, because compared to wind and solar, it is not that well recognized, because, as you know, the hydro picture is a very diverse one over Europe. There are some countries with a significant share, others with hydropower generation below 1 or 2%. So it really depends where people are coming from you're talking to. And that's why we've really tried to start with the basics and explaining people what hydropower is, which role it is currently playing, and what its role will be in an increasingly decarbonized power system. And in this regard, Gordon just said there is a incredible expansion expected on a global level. However, on an EU level, the situation is a different one. I think also Eduard mentioned it, to achieve the 2030 target, the 42.5% of renewable energy in the energy system, we require more than 1,000 gigawatt of additional capacity, and this additional capacity will mainly come from wind and solar. So from this 1,000 gigawatt, we only expect 10 to 15 gigawatt from hydropower. So really a minor contribution. And again, this will also come mainly from refurbishment and upgrading existing infrastructure. Nonetheless, it's not really about expanding hydropower in Europe. It's about increasing the flexibility and increasing the electricity storage capacity. So what we will need is, we will require those assets being able to provide renewable electricity when the sun does not shine, the wind doesn't blow. And what we will also require is storage capacity for those hours when we have excess electricity. We have seen this summer. We have seen this in wind strong phases in spring, and also now in Austria a few days ago, when there is too much electricity generated by these two variable technologies. And it will be key to be able to store electricity. And pump storage is a great technology to do so. And this technology is also able to store beyond the 4 or 8 hours, which is currently provided with batteries. So I hope this was not too long. I don't think, or if you allow me to summarize, I don't think there will be a significant expansion in capacity. However, a significant increase in the flexible capacity, so being flexible, and storage capacity.
Dirk, would you like to add
Yes,
your point of view?
good morning. And I can really just echo here what Adrian basically just pointed out here. What we see is the necessity to sort of like get a higher hydropower share within Europe is absolutely needed. And I mean, we see that it's unfortunately not very high on the radar of decision makers, be it at the European level or be it at national level. And I mean, here what we are doing is, I have actually two hats today. I mean, on the one side, I'm heading the European Small Hydropower chapter from the European Renewable Energies Federation. What we are basically, our members, they are national hydropower associations. And plus we have a network with whom we work together. And what we do is that we basically sort of like monitor and gather information about hydropower developments, both in the European countries, specifically for the small hydropower sector here in this case, but also, of course, what happened at EU level, any kind of initiatives, any kind of new legislation that is coming up. So, and then what we're going to do is, of course, together with our members, that we develop policy recommendations that we then sort of like bring into the discussions whenever there is kind of like relevant legislation developed. And then, like, for example, here, as it has been mentioned before, like for example, the revision of the Renewable Energy Directive. I guess here the overriding public interest principle is of very high importance, specifically for the hydropower sector. Also some provisions in the electricity market design files. So this is something that we do. And I mean, as I said, exactly as Adrian pointed out, we also see that there is still quite a lot of potential of hydropower in Europe. And I mean, it is true. We see on the one side that it is sort of like can be untapped with refurbishment, but I mean, specifically from the small hydropower sector, we see that there is quite a lot of potential of abundant small hydropower plants that have been stopped within the last decades. And here I would like to draw your attention, for example, to the Restore Hydro database. This is what we had developed with a former EU project, which is still online. And I guess in this database, you have around up to 70,000 entry points of potential small hydropower plants in that could be, because in many countries you still have the permits there, that could be sort of like quickly re-established. I mean, as the previous speakers have already pointed out, we have a huge challenge to decarbonize, ideally faster than by 2050. So it's not only wind and solar, but we need really every kind of renewable energy technology here on deck. Here, hydropower can play a much larger role than it is envisaged, for example, in the various scenarios that, for example, the European Commission have prepared, but also that the member states have prepared. And I mean, just a very quick idea, if you're going to look at the recent published national energy and climate plans, you see that in many countries, hydropower has not been sort of like fully taken into consideration. I'm talking here especially about Germany, for example. As Adrian pointed out, I mean, of course, it's very diverse within Europe. But you see that there's still sort of like possibilities to go higher. So what we do here is in particular, you know, within the next cycle to raise awareness here for the benefits and opportunities of hydropower. And I guess we come to that a little bit later here during the next questions and during the sessions. But I mean, in particular, also to promote the hydropower industry. And I mean, this is also something that we have done here in the past. With, for example, GIZ projects, with EU projects that we have promoted here, the European industry enterprises that are active in, for example, equipment manufacturing and turbine manufacturing, bringing them together with stakeholders outside of Europe, because here we see that export industry is actually quite strong. I would like to draw here the point, sort of like your attention to the HYPOSO database. So this is something where you can see just the sort of like a small overview of the richness of the European hydropower industry base that we have here. And then, of course, now specifically here for the next cycle, as we are observer in the so-called CIS implementation groups for the Water Framework Directive, this is something that we have an eye on and that we look at it. And then the second head, of course, that I have is here representing today also the ETIP Hydropower project. ETIP Hydropower is basically not only creating a kind of like hydropower network and strengthening this kind of network, but it is in particular to continue the work of a previous project, Hydropower Europe. And I mean, this is here in particular to continue working on the so-called research and innovation agenda, but also on the strategic industry roadmap, to which more than 600 stakeholders from industry, from research, from associations have been worked on. And here currently the main activities is that we have sort of like within these projects 3 working groups. One is on flexibility and storage, something that has been pointed out here also by the previous speakers, because this is something that will have a huge importance here within the coming years. We also work on hydropower and biodiversity issues. And in addition to that, we have hydropower and climate change. So these are the 3 working groups, but we will come back to that a little bit later during this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your insightful contribution. I'd like, if I may, to summarize what it was said so far. So there are quite some challenges. We've seen that the sector is sort of stable, and in Europe, it requires a lot of operation and maintenance. It's also the issue of the communication. Myself, for instance, before starting working at ERA, I didn't know a lot of hydropower. And sometimes I have the feeling that it's given for granted, maybe. So what associations like Hydroelectric and IHA and also ERA are doing is to promote this, and it's a very good sign. But we also heard some of the constraints and the challenges that lie ahead of us. So if you had like a magic wand now, if you were to imagine what's the future in 2050, how do you see hydropower in 2050? Some of the points were already touched upon, but what services are needed now at the moment for hydropower to play a crucial role in 30 years, in 40 years? Please, Thomas.
So I'm pleased that previous speakers touched on already what we do in research and innovation, while in my introduction I was more focused on the bigger policy scale. But when we go towards 2050, I just mentioned now, it is very important to think also about competitiveness of our energy system as an integral part of our overall economic and societal system. And in this respect, as also has shown the recently published LETA report, as well as the Draghi report, research innovation has a central pillar also in achieving this competitiveness. And this is particularly a relevant issue for hydropower. We recently conducted a study which was performed by led by Rand Europe and other partners about what we can do in research and innovation for energy security in the long term. And here specifically for hydropower, what came out as an interest that it's not a sector where we have, for example, a critical dependence on materials like for PV or batteries. Where the result was that one in the study, but for hydropower, it was particularly skills, I think, importantly, what we will talk about later. So how we maintain skills in the sector and social acceptance. So if we look for the long-term vision for 2050, I think we will have now, as mentioned previous speakers, we have this important refurbishment cycle. So we will need to keep hydropower fit for the energy system, for the flexibility needs, but hand in hand with sustainable hydropower, addressing social concerns and also making it also for future environmental requirements proof or best performant. And that's what we support actually with the framework program for research and innovation. Now, if I think about the topics we put forward there and let's say last decade nearly, they all had a focus, of course, on technical performance of machinery, but also under the context of new requirements of the energy system, namely flexibility, digitalization also was addressed, and sustainability always in this. And in this we have many projects, some of them were mentioned, and of course, keep a community like with the forum we created with the Hydropower Europe and ITIP Hydropower.
If I would say what would be a wish for 2050, I would say to see many of the developments from the research side that were done, installed on place and being demanded during operation by the plant owners. I think we have, so we are developing quite different set of technologies and improvements of how to operate, where sometimes quite complex solutions, but very much feasible to be considered at a plant level. The main issues today, but still there is not exactly the business case and the market for this. So often, for instance, hydropowers are operated as maybe decades ago. While we know that power system is evolving, we know that the requirements for both flexibility and sustainability are changing. So I hope that in the coming years we will see not only from a research and development side, but also from an implementation side, let's say an improvement of how hydropower plants are operated in the market with a clear boost of the technology. I'm saying that mainly because I'm convinced that hydropower will keep a key role in the energy transition. That's because the only other solution would be to have a new technology coming out from a clue that would actually be able to substitute in a clean way what hydropower does today. 2050 is not that far away, it's only in 25 years. So I truly hope that we will see this renaissance and the modernization of hydropower, considering all the tools that are being developed and of course all becoming developments that are currently ongoing from a research side.
Thank you. Before handing the floor to Edward, I just want to remind that if you have any question, you can scan the QR code and write them through Slido, or just go join at slido.com and insert the code that you can see there.
Well, the wish is good. I was just thinking, in 2050, if I see a little bit the discussions today, I mean, it's clear that we are looking today for 2030, 2040 on flexibility, that we are looking on storage very hard. And this, what I showed, is also in one of the projects I'm involved, Store to Hydro, looking on longer storage capacities. But still, for 2050, I think it will be a little bit challenging, because if we consider that we change a lot of industry also probably in the electrical side, so the demand on electricity will increase dramatically. I just saw a study in Austria. Austria has about today 70 terawatt hours of electricity consumption, what we are using as a citizens, not or partly the industry. If we consider electromobility as well, we have an additional 15 to 20 terawatt hours. And if we consider to electrify the industry, we see somehow a need of 200 terawatt hours. So by not doubling, but probably 3 times more on electricity production than now would be needed. And then is really the question, what role hydropower will really play? If it will be so important, probably we will see more other energy sources like wind and solar. And then I think the hydropower will play, and I'm sure that hydropower will always play a major role in terms of grid stabilization of those services. We also see already now, we see on the research side, like you see in Switzerland, we do the same in Austria, more or less. The aging of the components, very fast aging due to a new operation of the power plants. And if you bring this basket together, there will be quite a lot of questions to be answered, a lot of research work to be done, even more than today, I think. That's and in that vision, I just see that we need more skilled professionals. But that's for the other point. Hydropower will play a major role, but if we consider really this demand on electricity, just this small location for Austria, then that will be quite interesting. What the future will bring. In 2050, I'm not working anymore, so I know my retirement already. No. I'm encouraging everybody to do something. No, but it will be interesting. On the way there, hydropower will certainly play the role. It will ever play a role. But it's and the wish would be a little bit a change of mindset. A change of mindset to recognize these things and to be more open to research, also from the operator side. sometimes we see really hard to get data to develop those methods. Yeah, what we already probably has a kind of vision today. Yeah, let's see.
Thank you, Edward. Online, do you agree? Do you have anything else to add?
If I may come in here, I would say I have a little bit the more optimistic picture than Edward has. As maybe the share of hydropower in the generation, the overall generation will decrease. The relevance again of flexibility and storage capacity will be significant. And in this regard, I mentioned it earlier, there is no other technology at the moment available that can provide electricity storage beyond 8 hours on an economically feasible basis. And right now it is pump storage, and we see this, and I'm confronted with these developments all over Europe right now, as hydrogen is unfortunately not being developed as expected, or is not as competitive as expected. Pump storage is back on the agenda. So for sure, flexibility from my perspective provided by hydropower will be recognized and will be remunerated accordingly. We need to understand in 2050 we will have a decarbonized power system, and the current transition phase might not value flexibility services accordingly. But if we let the market perform and let the market provide the signals in a decarbonized system, there will be the market and the market signals for pump storage and flexible generation coming from reservoir hydropower. And if you allow me, I'd like to bring another element into the discussion. In 2050, we will be heavily impacted by a changing climate. And hydropower has or is providing benefits beyond the power system, like water management, water supply. And we see this today in the southern countries, where hydropower is, or using a reservoir for hydropower is just one element. So this combination of storing water, providing water for other usages, but also generating electricity, providing flexibility, exactly these synergies, I think, will be crucial and will be something of more relevance than it has today. So from southern areas, but also for Central Europe and up to the northern areas, where it might not be the drought situation that requires action, but the situation where there is more water than expected. So in flood situations, for example.
Really agree with that, but I would add one rider. In my vision, hydropower is actually paid for all of these services that it provides, both within the electricity sector for flexibility, frequency control, black start, all the things that it provides, and also those flood and flood prevention and drought control. All of those kinds of services are paid, so that people who operate hydro assets are able to judge, what are their income streams, where do they need to invest in order to provide those adequately. Because at the moment, those remuneration streams just don't exist, and all you're really paid for is plain vanilla megawatt hours. So that's what people produce, plain vanilla megawatt hours, which is the least valuable thing that hydro can provide. I mean, my vision would see hydro operators getting 50% or more of their power revenue from flexibility services, being that flexible bit in the sandwich with wind and solar and any other technologies that are out there.
I mean, I can only echo that. Here, the sort of like system service provider or system services, this is something where hydropower will certainly play a really very high role. But exactly as has pointed out, we still need the kind of like legal framework, and also like, for example, from the market system here, clear signals for investors to go in, but also to have business cases, because in most cases they are not remunerated. It's exactly as Gordon has just pointed out, only electricity. With all the advantages of hydropower, this is something that needs to be much more incentivized. And I mean, what we see is this from a positive side. I see that, like for example, in the scenarios that DG Energy has been provided 3 years ago, you see that, of course, in comparison to other renewable energy sources, the contribution of hydropower is going down, but on the other side, there is an increase of hydropower expected here for 2050. Now, if you're going to look a little bit more in the details, this is exactly as Adrian has pointed out, it's mostly refurbishment, but the Commission at least envisages to have a high part or increase of storage plants, of pumped hydropower storage, specifically to provide flexibility and storage for a massive influx of valuable renewable energy sources such as PV and wind. So this is really very good, but exactly the business cases, the incentives for investments still need to come in. And in particular, of course, it will take time. However, where hydropower can play already now a really very high role, and where this is what decision makers, but also, for example, energy agencies at national level should have a look at this. We have currently the problem that grids are the main obstacle for renewable energy development. I mean, what we have is if you're going to look at PV, if you're going to look at wind, they have these projects in the pipeline, and it takes, despite all the improvements with administrators and permitting procedures, sort of like really the big problem is they need grid connection. And I mean, this is very often like one of the bottlenecks. So if you think about that, grids planning can take up to 2 decades because of social resistance, because of like other constraints. And we need to have a look how we can use the existing grids in a kind of like very smart way to integrate these additional electricity from, for example, wind and solar. And I mean, here hydropower can play a huge role. Here, first of all, storage facilities, but I mean, in particular, I would like to point out to a study from 2018 from the Wuppertal Institute, from the Wuppertal University, where you see, like for example, that only in Germany alone, small hydropower plants can save around 1 billion in grid enhancement by sort of like just keeping the grid stable and providing all these kind of like system services. So this is something that that should be looked in, of course, here. And then if you're going to look into 2050, what we see here already is some positive trends, like for example, that hydropower is more and more part of energy communities, energy cooperatives, small hydropower plants at local level. But what they do is they need this, of course, for their mix. And I mean, what I always find very amazing is that you can find, for example, hydropower. If you look in the Dutch province of Gelderland, you see that, like for example, there they try to make villages completely autark, just on renewable electricity production. And of course, what they do is that they combine all different kind of renewable energy sources, and hydropower with kinetic turbines are part of it. Even if, and imagine with sort of like slow flowing rivers in the Netherlands, they can provide sort of like kind of like baseload, but it is part of this whole mix and provides in particular these grid stability. And then, of course, exactly multi-purpose function, as Gordon mentioned already. But the idea is really to what I mentioned here at the beginning. We have all these possibilities, and just by looking through the various member states and see what's gonna go, and also in comparison to other regions outside of Europe, we see that there could be much more possible if we sort of like would have a little bit more political support on that level. Also, when it comes, what Thomas mentioned before, on social acceptance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your insightful points. We have quite a lot of questions from the audience, so I will try to group them according to the topic, but the first question is directed to Mr. Schlecker. I will read it. So, how do you work on improvement of financial support of research in hydropower compared to solar, wind, and hydrogen?
Of course, when we look in the work program, I mean, what we support in research innovation, currently now with Horizon Europe, we have, of course, a set of technologies we support in the portfolio of clean energy technologies. And as I said, hydropower is one of them where we address currently critical aspects. I group them like with flexibility, also sustainability. And of course, this is in a set of, let's say, the overall chapter of all the renewable technologies which are supported there, including also PV, wind, and it is decided together with the member states, of course, how the topics are put forward. So I think this is also based on what we need to consider the challenges of the current sector. And according to that, we then have these funding lines. And I think we have a very positive development in the last years. I mean, if we compare it, I have now only the data for Horizon 2020 as a multi-annual program. If we compare that to FP7, we had more or less, now I do not have the exact number, but we had more or less an increase from 10 million up to 40 million in total support to that area. In Horizon Europe, probably we will end up with something comparable, but I do not have, first we are not yet at the cycle, but we need to see at the end. What I'm more happy about is that we are now supporting the complete pipeline. So first we have the ETIP Hydropower Forum as an important stakeholder forum within the set plan where exactly we develop these important visions, the research innovation agenda, and basically an exchange with the stakeholders about our common objectives we should have in this respect in Europe. And we have low TRL, research innovation actions, as well as innovation actions as a higher TRL. We had also market support actions already on hydropower in this respect. So I'm actually, from my view as policy officer in this area, I'm quite happy about the developments we have and that we cover the whole cycle there. Other sectors, I think the question was in that respect, other sectors receive more money, but I think it is always, we need to consider what are the challenges we have. Hydropower is, of course, an existing sector, which is functional and proves to be functional since many years. So strategically, what is discussed in the program committee with the member states and decided together is where funding is allocated to address specific current needs. And I think, from my view in the topics, we tackle many of the challenges which we heard now up to now in this panel, which have to be addressed in future. And I think the vision will be to continue to do so, to support those, let's say, research questions where it makes sense to do this at European level, to keep hydropower competitive, and with the vision to have the idea, because I didn't answer to that in your previous question, what is my wish? My wish is actually that in 2050 we have this important role of hydropower and that we are, of course, fully decarbonized in Europe. That's my wish. And then we address all this with having a robust sector and also full sustainable hydropower.
Thank you very much. There are a series of questions on social acceptance and what steps could be done to improve society view on hydropower that I will couple also with another question that says, can Italian project Piccolo Lacetti be a good guideline for future hydropower, a model for gaining public sympathy and acceptance of hydropower? Is there anyone who would like to address this question of how to improve the social acceptance?
If I may, I can start.
Please.
At Euroelectric, we've also been looking into this topic, and what was or might be surprising you now is that compared to wind and solar, hydropower has less a problem with public acceptance. Hydropower is lacking the political support. This is true, but for people who are living close to projects that are being developed, they usually understand the benefits these plants provide. So this is something I think that needs to be pointed out. So there is a slightly different situation for hydro than for wind and solar when it comes to the public acceptance. But of course, there is an issue with sustainability, and but I do not think that this is a general issue. Maybe we have been bad, or the sector have not been ideal in communicating the things, the measures that have been implemented in the past. Currently at Euroelectric, we are working on another short story. Please have a look at them. So as I mentioned it earlier, we did significant efforts in communicating about hydropower. Another short story is now looking into the sustainability topic. And here we are really collecting what is happening all over Europe. We have collected best practice examples, and if you look at them, you really see that there is a significant progress happening, and these sustainability issues that are sometimes communicated are not how to say it, are not really true for all plants. Of course, there are some that would require additional efforts, but overall, I see a very positive tendency, and I think this will end in a bigger support by society and also by policymakers.
Thank you,
If I could add to that, I think it's really important that it's not the hydropower industry marking its own homework. We at the International Hydropower Association have long championed an independent assessment of that, and now there is the Hydropower Sustainability Standard run by the Independent Hydropower Sustainability Alliance, where people can have their projects certified. People can see it has been assessed against a rigorous standard for sustainability across all of its forms, both social, environmental, and financial, so that people can see that it's had an independent validation of its sustainability. So for us, that's very key, that there is a clear standard and that people keep to it, and that it is assessed by non-industry bodies. So there are a lot, in many cases across Europe, the standards that are applied just by the regulatory authorities are high, and as high as the standard that we have set. But it's important that you get that stamp, and that allows you to show that they're a responsible developer and industry addressing these issues and being seen to address them, I think is where we're coming from.
If I may add just one sentence to the standard, I think what's important to point out that in Europe we have a very comprehensive and strict legislation in place. I totally agree, such a standard has an added value, but in Europe, if you are receiving a permit for a plant, for example, for refurbishing a plant, you need to be in line with legislation, at least go through all the steps. So a hydropower plant being currently developed in Europe is a sustainable hydropower plant only by complying with legislation.
Maybe to add to that, I think in societal acceptance, there is, of course, also an important global component in the discussion. And for example, we have a project, Hydro4You, which is an innovation action in Central Asia to specifically create win-win situations in context of climate, energy, water nexus. And I think there is an important role and opportunity also for the European hydropower research and industry to contribute at a global level to maintain sustainability high, and that globally we have a good perception of hydropower, and we reach this goal of sustainable hydropower worldwide. And then this will, of course, feed back together with multipurpose, which was discussed before, and creating win-win solutions.
And on that positive note, I'm afraid we have to close this panel session. We are running quite late. We still have a couple of questions. Feel free to address them during the coffee break. And let's have coffee now. Thank you, all of you, for joining this discussion. And for those joining online, I would say see you in 30 minutes. Thanks again.